December 25, 1944. The war did not pause for Christmas. High above a frozen Europe scarred by 6 years of fire, a lone American fighter cut through the pale winter sky. Frost crawled along the canopy edges. The air was thin, brittle, as if even the atmosphere had grown tired of violence. Below, snow-covered bomb craters and shattered villages like a burial shroud. First Lieutenant James Carter of the United States Army Air Forces checked his instruments again. Everything normal. Oil pressure steady. Ammunition full. His aircraft, a North American P-51 Mustang, gleamed silver against the white clouds. It was one of the most feared fighters in the European theater. Long range. Fast. Deadly. Today's mission was routine. High-altitude patrol along a supply corridor near the German border. No bombing run. No escort duty. Just watch the skies. Intercept anything that moved. Routine. But there was nothing routine about Christmas. In his flight jacket pocket was a small folded letter from home. His wife had written about their son's first steps. About snow falling softly on their porch in Ohio. About church bells ringing. Church bells. Up here, the only bells were machine guns. Carter adjusted his oxygen mask and scanned the horizon. The war had grown desperate in late 1944. The Battle of the Bulge raged below, unseen but felt in every briefing. German pilots, many barely trained boys, were being thrown into the air in a last attempt to slow the Allied advance. That made patrols more dangerous. He wasn't looking for a duel. He was looking for survival. Then he saw it. A dark speck against the cloud line. Low. Fast. Instinct replaced reflection. Carter dipped his wing and descended, engine roaring as the Mustang surged forward. The speck grew larger. Sleek nose. Narrow wings. Black cross insignia. A Messerschmitt Bf 109. The German fighter was alone. Strange. By 1944, Luftwaffe patrols rarely flew solo unless fuel was low or missions were improvised. Carter's pulse quickened. He had the altitude advantage, the first rule of air combat. He tightened his turn. The German pilot saw him. The sky instantly transformed from silent winter cathedral to hunting ground. The Bf 109 banked sharply, climbing to meet the threat instead of fleeing. A bold move. 2 predators circling. 2 young men born thousands of miles apart. Both awake before dawn. Both carrying letters from home. Both told that the other was the enemy. The distance between them closed rapidly. 800 yards. 600. 400. Carter's thumb rested near the trigger button mounted on his control stick. One squeeze and 6.50 caliber machine guns would tear through aluminum and flesh alike. Christmas morning. The German fighter rolled left suddenly, sunlight flashing off its canopy. For a brief second, just a heartbeat, Carter could see the other pilot's face. Not a monster. Not a symbol. Just a man. And neither yet had fired a shot. The distance vanished. Carter squeezed the throttle forward and dove, the Packard-built Merlin engine of his North American P-51 Mustang screaming as it clawed for speed. The world narrowed to angles, airspeed, and geometry. Nothing else mattered now. The German pilot reacted instantly. The Messerschmitt Bf 109 snapped into a climbing spiral, trying to force an overshoot. It was a classic defensive maneuver. Tight, aggressive, trusting in the aircraft's superior climb rate at lower speeds. Carter anticipated it. He pulled up hard, G-forces crushing him into his seat. The Mustang shuddered but held. Vapor streamed from the wings in tight white ribbons as both fighters clawed upward into the cold. 300 yards. Too far for a clean shot. The German rolled inverted and dove sharply, gravity assisting his escape. Carter followed. The sky became a vertical battlefield, blue above, white below, with no ground to orient by. Only instinct. He lined up the nose. For a split second, the Bf 109 filled his gun sight. He hesitated. Not out of mercy, not yet, but calculation. The angle was wrong. Too much deflection. Ammunition wasted on bad geometry meant vulnerability later. He held fire. The German pilot broke right at the last possible moment. They passed each other at closing speeds near 700 miles per hour, close enough that Carter again saw the flash of the other man's goggles. Then both aircraft roared past and climbed once more. Now the German had altitude. The tables turned in seconds. The Bf 109 dove with frightening speed, sunlight glinting off its wings as it descended behind the Mustang. Carter's warning instinct flared. He banked hard left, then right, throwing off aim. The Mustang trembled as airflow fought the control surfaces. Still no gunfire. Why? Carter risked a glance back. The German was there. Perfect position. Perfect distance. Any trained Luftwaffe pilot could have ended it. But no tracers came. Instead, the German held formation distance, close enough to threaten, far enough not to fire. Confusion crept into Carter's mind. Was the enemy pilot inexperienced? Out of ammunition? Testing him? He throttled up and climbed again, daring the German to follow. The Bf 109 followed. They circled one another in widening arcs, neither committing to the fatal shot. It became less a dogfight and more a chess match played at 20,000 feet. Every move mirrored. Every climb countered. Minutes stretched. Fuel burned. The sky remained eerily silent except for engines. Carter realized something unsettling. This wasn't incompetence. The German pilot was good. Very good. Twice more they achieved firing solutions. Fleeting, dangerous windows where a squeeze of the trigger would have written history in smoke and flame. Twice more neither man fired. Instead of pressing advantage, the German broke off early each time. Defensive, but not desperate. Alert, but restrained. Carter's thoughts raced. Christmas morning. Church bells. Snow-covered fields. A son learning to walk. Below them, men were freezing in foxholes in the Ardennes. Cities lay shattered. Entire air forces had bled themselves dry. Up here, two machines, masterpieces of engineering, circled like ancient duelists who both knew exactly how the story usually ended. With fire. With parachutes drifting. Or with none at all. The German pilot leveled out first. Not climbing. Not diving. Simply straight and steady. An opening. Carter eased into position behind him once more. Perfect range. Perfect angle. His thumb rested on the trigger. All he had to do was press. Instead, the German pilot did something utterly unexpected. The Bf 109's wings tilted gently side to side. A subtle motion. Deliberate. Not evasive. Not aggressive. A wing waggle. The universal language of the sky. Carter blinked. He had seen that gesture before, over England, when friendly fighters returned from mission. A silent acknowledgement. A greeting. Or sometimes, a salute. The Mustang held steady behind him. The sky, for one fragile moment, was no longer a battlefield. It was a question. And Carter had to decide how to answer it. The wings moved again. Left. Right. Slow. Intentional. Not the violent rocking of turbulence. Not the sharp snap of evasive maneuvering. A signal. Carter's breathing grew loud inside his oxygen mask. His thumb still rested against the trigger stud of the Mustang's control stick. One twitch of muscle memory and 6 Browning machine guns would ignite, stitching fire through the slender fuselage ahead of him. The German pilot was offering his back. Offering trust. Or inviting a trap. The war had taught men to expect deception. Damaged bombers feigned surrender before gunners opened fire. Fighters sometimes lured pursuers into hidden formations. Mercy could be fatal. Carter edged closer, closing to 200 yards. Close enough now to see the yellow band around the Bf 109's fuselage. Close enough to make out exhaust stains streaking back along the cowling. The aircraft bore scars, patched panels, mismatched paint. This was not a factory-fresh machine flown by an untested boy. This pilot had survived long enough to earn experience. And experience meant choice. The German wagged his wings once more. Carter felt something unexpected rising in his chest. Not fear, not anger. Recognition. They had circled each other for nearly 10 minutes. Tested climbs. Tested dives. Each man had offered the other clean kill shots. Each had declined. The sky had become something strange. Not friendship. Not peace. But parity. Carter made his decision. He eased his stick gently left, then right. The Mustang's broad laminar flow wings mirrored the motion. A wing waggle. For a moment, the two aircraft flew in loose formation, enemies aligned against the winter sun. The German pilot lifted one gloved hand from his controls. A small movement inside the canopy. A salute. Not the rigid political salute demanded on the ground. A pilot's gesture. Two fingers raised to the brow. Ancient as warfare itself, the acknowledgement of another warrior who could have killed you, and chose not to. Carter felt his throat tighten. He returned it. Two fingers to his helmet. Below them, the earth remained at war. The Ardennes offensive raged through snow-choked forests. Artillery thundered. Infantry froze in foxholes. Cities burned. Up here, at 20,000 feet, there was only wind and engine noise, and two men suspended between duty and humanity. The German fighter edged slightly ahead, then slowed. Not stalling. Not baiting. Just holding position. Carter realized what the man was doing. Showing his aircraft. The Bf-109's tail bore shrapnel damage. A panel near the radiator housing was patched roughly. One wingtip carried a faint crease, perhaps from flak. This was not a machine in prime condition. Perhaps ammunition was low. Perhaps fuel was critical. Or perhaps the German pilot simply understood that this fight would likely end with one dead and one living. And today, of all days, neither outcome felt worth the trigger pull. Carter glanced at his fuel gauge. He wasn't in danger yet. But extended maneuvering had burned more than planned. Command would expect a patrol report. If he returned without a claim, questions would follow. Yet what would he write? Engaged enemy fighter. Mutual salute. Disengaged. It sounded absurd. The German dipped his nose slightly and turned east. Not a sharp combat break. A smooth, unmistakable departure. He was leaving the fight. Giving Carter one final opportunity. The Mustang held steady behind him for 3 long seconds. The gun sight centered perfectly over the enemy's engine cowling. A squeeze. That was all. Instead, Carter pulled back gently on the stick and climbed away in the opposite direction. West. Toward Allied lines. Toward home. Behind him, the Bf-109 grew smaller against the winter sky. Two predators. Neither victorious. Neither defeated. On Christmas morning, 1944, above a continent tearing itself apart, they had chosen something rarer than skill. They had chosen restraint. And in doing so, they created a truce no treaty would ever record. The distance between them widened, but neither pilot broke immediately for full throttle. For several long seconds, they flew apart slowly, not fleeing, not chasing, just two aircraft diverging like crossed paths in the snow. Carter felt an unfamiliar weight settle over him. He had trained for this since 1942. Gunnery practice over the Arizona desert. Recognition drills. Combat briefings that reduced enemy aircraft to silhouettes and statistics. A Messerschmitt Bf 109 wasn't a man in those classrooms. It was a target profile. Yet moments earlier, that target had lifted a hand in salute. War stripped men down to instinct. But sometimes, rarely, it revealed something older than war itself. Honor. The German pilot banked gently once more, enough to bring his canopy into Carter's view again. Sunlight reflected off the glass, briefly obscuring his face. Then the glare shifted. Their eyes met across empty sky. Carter did something he had never done in combat. He slid his Mustang closer, not into firing position, but into parallel. For a heartbeat, the two fighters flew side by side. The American machine, the sleek, long-nosed North American P-51 Mustang, and the narrow-wing German Interceptor, born of a different ideology, engineered for the same purpose: killing. Yet neither pilot reached for his guns. Carter studied the other aircraft. The Balkenkreuz insignia stood stark against worn camouflage. Oil streaked from the engine cowling. The propeller tips flashed yellow as they spun. Inside that cockpit was a man who had likely lost friends. Perhaps brothers. Perhaps a home already reduced to rubble by bombers like the one Carter sometimes escorted. And still, he had chosen not to fire. There were stories pilots told in mess halls, tales of chivalry in the early years of the war. Bomber crews spared. Parachuting airmen left alone. But by 1944, such restraint had grown rare. Too many cities destroyed. Too many names carved into memorial walls. And yet here it was. Not ordered. Not commanded. Just chosen. The German pilot raised his hand once more. This time higher. Clearer. A final salute. Carter answered firmly, pressing two gloved fingers to the edge of his flight helmet. No radios connected them. No shared language bridged the gap. But the meaning was unmistakable. I see you. I could have ended you. You could have ended me. Today, we do neither. The German eased his aircraft slightly downward, nose tilting toward the eastern horizon. A silent farewell. Carter held formation for 3 seconds longer than necessary. Then he rolled left and climbed sharply westward. The two fighters separated, one toward collapsing Reich territory, the other toward advancing Allied lines. Behind them, contrails slowly dissolved into the winter sky. Below, artillery thundered without pause. History would never mark that moment. No official ceasefire had been declared. No white flags flown. No photographs taken. But for less than a minute over war-torn Europe, an ancient code, older than nations, older than politics, had surfaced between two adversaries. Respect between warriors. Not forgiveness. Not friendship. But recognition. Carter flew on in silence. His guns remained unfired. And though he could not yet articulate it, he knew this Christmas would follow him long after the war ended. The Mustang climbed steadily, engine humming with disciplined power. Carter kept his eyes forward, but every instinct urged him to glance back. Combat training demanded verification, confirm the enemy's withdrawal, ensure no sudden reversal, no last-minute attack from behind. He looked anyway. The Messerschmitt Bf 109 was still visible, now a shrinking silhouette against the pale eastern sky. It did not turn. It did not dive. It did not pursue. It simply flew home. That was the moment Carter understood something profound. Disengagement required more courage than the trigger. Killing in war was sanctioned, expected, rewarded. Walking away was not. His radio crackled faintly with distant chatter from other Allied patrols. Routine position reports. Weather updates. Nothing extraordinary. Somewhere miles away, other pilots were firing guns, claiming victories, watching parachutes bloom, or not bloom at all. Up here, silence had won. Carter checked his fuel again. The extended maneuvering had cost him. He calculated quickly. Safe margin, but not generous. Another prolonged engagement could have forced him into risky decisions. Perhaps the German had done the same math. Perhaps both had recognized that on Christmas morning, survival, not glory, was the wiser prize. The Mustang leveled off and headed west at cruising speed. The Ardennes lay beneath him, hidden by cloud cover but very real. The Battle of the Bulge had turned forests into slaughterhouses. Young Americans froze in foxholes. Young Germans bled into snow. If Carter had shot down that fighter, it would have changed nothing on the ground. One less aircraft. One less pilot. One more telegram delivered to a doorstep. He imagined a small German town, church steeple cracked from bombing, windows taped against shockwaves. Somewhere inside, perhaps a mother waited for news. Perhaps a wife. Perhaps no one at all. War had stripped Europe of certainty. The same could be said for America. Carter's wife would be at church that morning, their son bundled in winter clothes, unaware of the thin line between existence and absence that had just played out miles above France. Carter's squadron commander expected results. Air superiority was measured in claims confirmed and enemy aircraft destroyed. A clean gunsight picture followed by a burst of .50 caliber fire was proof of effectiveness. But what category did Mercy fall under? He replayed the engagement in his mind. The altitude shifts. The mirrored turns. The clean firing windows declined by both sides. This had not been hesitation from weakness. It had been deliberate. He wondered what the German pilot would report. Engine trouble? Weather interference? No contact? Or perhaps nothing at all? Carter's airfield appeared faintly through thinning clouds, a scar of concrete carved into muddy winter terrain. Smoke drifted from warming barrels near dispersal huts. Mechanics waited in heavy coats, scanning the sky for returning aircraft. As he descended into landing pattern, routine flooded back into place. Flaps deployed. Airspeed reduced. Checklist automatic. The wheels touched down smoothly. Engine to idle. Canopy slid open. Cold air rushed in. Ground crew approached, expecting stories of dogfights or claims. Carter climbed down slowly from his North American P-51 Mustang. He removed his gloves, flexing stiff fingers. One of the crew chiefs looked up eagerly. "See anything up there, Lieutenant?" Carter paused. Yes. He had seen something rare, but not something that fit neatly into a combat report. He gave a small shake of his head. Just another patrol. And with that, the truce in the sky descended into silence. The debriefing room smelled of coffee and damp wool. Maps lined the walls. Colored pins marked shifting front lines. A chalkboard listed sorties flown, aircraft lost, victories confirmed. Numbers defined progress. Numbers justified sacrifice. Carter sat at the long wooden table, flight jacket unzipped, helmet resting beside him. Around him, other pilots spoke in bursts of adrenaline. Tracer fire, evasive rolls, near misses. One lieutenant claimed probable damage on a Focke-Wulf. Another described flak bursts over the Ardennes. When it was Carter's turn, all eyes shifted. "Contact?" the intelligence officer asked, pencil ready. Carter nodded once. Single-engine fighter. Likely a Bf-109. He chose his words carefully. Engaged briefly. No shots fired. Enemy disengaged east. The pencil paused. No shots, the officer repeated. Negative. No clear firing solution. It was not entirely untrue. In combat, clarity was subjective. Angles shifted. Seconds blurred. Memory protected itself. The officer made a short notation and moved on. No claim filed. No victory added to the board. No medal recommended. Just another patrol entered into record books that would one day gather dust. But the absence of ink told its own story. That night, in his bunk, Carter unfolded the letter from his wife again. He read about church hymns and candlelight services. About their son's fascination with snowflakes melting on his mittens. He imagined, somewhere far to the east, another pilot perhaps reading a similar letter, written in German, folded along worn creases, carrying news from a town increasingly threatened by Allied bombers. The Luftwaffe pilot had made the same choice. Somewhere in a different debriefing room, under different flags and portraits, he too would have been asked, "Contact." And he too might have answered, "Negative engagement." No glory. No Iron Cross recommendation. Just survival. The war in late 1944 was merciless. Fuel shortages crippled Germany's air force. Allied air superiority tightened daily. Pilots on both sides understood the mathematics of attrition. Yet on Christmas morning, two equations had been altered. Not by strategy. Not by politics. By restraint. The skies over Europe had witnessed countless duels, spirals of smoke, flaming wreckage tumbling toward frozen fields. Most ended without ceremony. Few were remembered individually. But this encounter lived differently, not in official archives, not in victory tallies, but in memory. Years later, when the war was over and uniforms replaced by civilian coats, Carter would still recall the sunlight flashing off that German canopy. The subtle wing waggle. The raised gloved hand. He would remember the moment his thumb rested on the trigger, and chose not to move. Historians often measure wars in divisions deployed, territories gained, and aircraft destroyed. Yet wars are also shaped by quieter moments, decisions invisible to commanders but profound to the men who make them. The Christmas truce of 1914 had occurred in muddy trenches, soldiers exchanging cigarettes and songs. 30 years later, in a different war of greater scale and brutality, a smaller truce unfolded at 20,000 feet. No witnesses. No photographs. Just two machines suspended in winter light. The sky offered no monuments. But it remembered. On December 25, 1944, above a continent at war, an American pilot in a North American P-51 Mustang and a German pilot in a Messerschmitt Bf 109 met as enemies. They parted as professionals. And for a fleeting moment in history, the guns of Christmas remained silent, not because they could not fire, but because two men decided they would not.